a quiet city tucked along the South Saskatchewan River, known for its gas lamps, open skies, and a small-town comfort that hadn't been disturbed in decades. It was the kind of place where people didn't just know their neighbors, they trusted them. Children rode bikes until dark, doors were left unlocked, and tragedy was something that happened somewhere else. But on April 23, 2006, that illusion ended. Inside a modest two-story home on 24th Street, a family of four lived what most would call an ordinary life. Mark and Deborah Richardson were raising their two children, 12-year-old Jasmine and 8-year-old Jacob. To their friends, they were close-knit, loving, stable. But behind the walls of their home, a quiet storm had been building. A storm no one saw coming.
That Sunday morning, neighbors noticed something unusual. The Richardsons' truck was still parked out front. The blinds were drawn, and not a sound came from inside. When a young boy from the neighborhood went over to check, he peeked through a window and saw something that made him run for help. When police arrived, the silence of the Richardson home broke under the sound of radios and boots on tile. The first officer entered through the front door. The house looked normal until they reached the basement stairs. There, at the bottom, lay 48-year-old Deborah Richardson. Her body surrounded by blood, a knife wound to her chest, her hands still positioned as if she'd tried to fight back. Nearby was 42-year-old Mark Richardson, stabbed 24 times, the sheer force suggesting a violent struggle. And upstairs, in his small bedroom, decorated with toys and hockey posters, was 8-year-old Jacob. His throat had been cut. The house was silent, the air heavy. 3 members of one family gone. And the only person missing was 12-year-old Jasmine Richardson. At first, police feared the obvious, that Jasmine had been kidnapped. But when detectives entered her room, they found something that didn't fit that theory. Her room wasn't ransacked. There were no signs of forced entry, but on her desk, they found drawings, sketches of violent scenes, and a laptop with open chat logs that hinted at something unthinkable.
In 2006, the internet was a different place. Social media was still new. Sites like MySpace and MSN Messenger connected teenagers to strangers from all over the world, often without their parents' knowledge. Jasmine had been spending more and more time online, exploring alternative communities that romanticized darkness, goth culture, vampire fantasies, rebellion. Her parents didn't understand it. They saw it as dangerous. And when they found out she was talking to a man much older than her, they tried to stop it. But that man, 23-year-old Jeremy Steinkay, wasn't just another online friend. He called himself a 300-year-old werewolf. He wore a vial of blood around his neck, and he told people he could taste human flesh. Most dismissed him as a delusional goth trying to impress people online. But to a 12-year-old girl looking for attention and identity, he was exciting. When Jasmine and Jeremy met in person, their connection intensified. He saw her as an escape from his broken life. She saw him as someone who made her feel powerful, older, independent, special. But when Mark and Deborah found out, their reaction was immediate. They forbade her from seeing him again. They took her computer. They grounded her. To them, it was protection. To Jasmine, it was betrayal. And in her growing teenage rage, that betrayal turned into something darker. She and Jeremy began exchanging messages filled with hatred for her parents. Fantasy became planning. Love turned into obsession. Investigators would later uncover hundreds of messages between the two. In one, Jasmine wrote, "I have this plan. It begins with me killing them and ends with me living with you." Jeremy replied, "We need to get a little more creative with details and stuff." Days later, he posted on his public profile, "Their throats I want to slit. They will regret the shit they have done." In the weeks leading up to the murders, the pair immersed themselves in movies and music about love and death, most notably Natural Born Killers, a film about a young couple who murder the girl's family and go on the run. They weren't watching it for entertainment. They were studying it.
That night, Jasmine's parents went to bed unaware of what was coming. Sometime after midnight, Jeremy arrived at the house armed with a knife. He entered through a basement window. Deborah heard a noise and went to investigate. Moments later, Jeremy attacked her, stabbing her 12 times. Mark woke to the sound of her screams. He rushed downstairs, unarmed, and tried to fight back. But Jeremy was stronger. 24 stab wounds later, Mark Richardson was dead. Upstairs, 8-year-old Jacob woke to the noise. He called out for his sister, and Jasmine came into his room. According to her later statements, she, quote, didn't want him to see what had happened, so she stabbed him 4 times. Then, Jeremy slit his throat. When it was over, they cleaned themselves off, grabbed a bag, and walked out hand in hand, leaving behind everything.
The next morning, the Richardson house became a crime scene. Within hours, Jasmine and Jeremy were named as suspects. They fled town with the help of a friend, 19-year-old Casey Lancaster, who helped wipe blood from Jeremy's truck and drove them towards Saskatchewan. The couple was found the next day outside a small convenience store, laughing, cuddling, and talking about getting married. When police approached, neither resisted arrest. In her statement, Jasmine said she felt bad, not for her family, but because Jeremy only did it for her. In 2007, both were charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder. Because Jasmine was only 12, she couldn't be tried as an adult under Canada's Youth Criminal Justice Act. Her maximum possible sentence? 10 years. Jeremy, tried as an adult, faced life imprisonment. The courtroom was packed for every hearing. Jasmine appeared calm, polite, and eerily composed. Psychiatrists testified that she was immature, impressionable, and deeply manipulated. But others argued that she had been the one to orchestrate it all. After weeks of testimony, the jury found her guilty on all counts. Jasmine's sentence shocked many. 10 years total. 4 in a psychiatric hospital, 4.5 under supervision in the community, and the rest under conditional release. Jeremy Steinke received life in prison with no parole for 25 years. To the public, the punishments felt uneven. To the court, they were a reflection of age and rehabilitation potential. The case became a lightning rod for debate. Was this justice or leniency disguised as compassion?
While serving her sentence, Jasmine completed therapy, schooling, and vocational programs. Reports from her doctors described her as introspective and remorseful. She maintained good behavior, showing no signs of violence. In 2011, she was moved to a halfway house under close supervision. By 2016, she had completed her sentence. 4 years later, her record was expunged. Today, she lives somewhere in Canada under a new identity. Her location is unknown. Her name changed. Her past legally erased. Psychologists studying the case have described it as a tragic collision of adolescent defiance and adult influence. Jeremy's control over Jasmine fit patterns of grooming, a slow manipulation that isolates, rewires, and distorts judgment. But the disturbing truth is that Jasmine was not coerced in the traditional sense. She participated willingly. And that duality, victim and perpetrator, is what makes this case so haunting. One expert later said, "This wasn't a monster creating another. It was two broken people feeding each other's delusions."
The Medicine Hat murders left an indelible scar on Canada. It changed how parents viewed online safety. It reshaped conversations about juvenile sentencing. And it left a small prairie town struggling to reconcile innocence and horror. Neighbors who still live nearby say that every spring they remember that day when police lights lit up their quiet street and the words Medicine Hat became synonymous with tragedy.
The story of Jasmine Richardson isn't just about murder. It's about influence, immaturity, and obsession, and how love, when twisted by darkness, can destroy everything it touches. Was Jasmine truly evil? Or was she a child, trapped in a fantasy she didn't understand until it was too late? Judge Scott Brooker, who oversaw her release, said something that still divides people to this day. "I think your parents and brother would be proud of you." Some heard mercy, others outrage. But either way, the question remains. How do you measure justice when the killer was once a child? Nearly 20 years later, the Richardson home still stands in Medicine Hat. Different owners, different lives, but the same address that once held unthinkable tragedy. The silence on that street today feels heavier than ever, as if the air itself remembers what happened. Because sometimes, evil doesn't come from monsters. It comes from people we least expect. And sometimes, it comes from children.